start with announcements and stuff.
Yeah, I can start first. I'm officially facilitating today, but I know we have informal conversation plans, maybe around back to school stuff. And the announcement from up here is that we did interviews for a part-time educator with REAP, so I'm excited to be able to have somebody who's going to be able to help us out in our biggest school district this year, which covers a huge geographic area and they like Anchorage whole area, Anchorage School District. So it's gonna be really nice to have somebody helping out with that. And maybe we're just gonna keep pursuing funding to hopefully be able to turn that into a full-time position in the future, so we can just have another full-time educator permanently. But otherwise, just good summer camp last week. 18 kids built little houses with put solar and wind on them. Had fun.
That's awesome.
I think everybody knows me, but I'm Colleen Fisk from Renewable Energy Alaska Project, Education Director.
I can go next. Thanks, Colleen. I am Gina Fiorelli-Duranlo, CLEAN Program Coordinator. And CLEAN is getting geared up to announce some webinars for this fall, which I'm excited about. We're going to have a couple of new ones. Excuse me. Had a little sneeze there. And so that should be forthcoming. We're doing I guess I can talk about this a little bit more once we get into the discussion, but we're doing a little back to school mini campaign. So we're going to include information about that. And I'm very, very happy because Katie Boyd is starting to transition back into work after parental leave. So she'll start coming to these a little bit more as well again, which is exciting. And yeah, I think that's it for CLEAN. Anne is next to me, so I'm gonna pass it to her.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't really have any, announcements. We don't, we've kind of plugging along doing their thing, and that's about it. So I don't really have too much to say today.
That's all good.
Yeah, yeah. Saving the world, saving the world.
Who wants to go next? Scott, do you have any announcements or?
Sure. Yeah. Florida Creators Network representative here. Actually, we do. We have a presentation in a couple of weeks. So I'll drop a flyer in the chat room with one of our local meteorologists, John Morales from Miami. So a big climate education supporter with the CLEO, which I'm sure some of you know, but so that's coming up, and I hope you'll consider, especially he's going to talk about cleans and climate change. So still plenty of time left, unfortunately, for hurricane season and on the coast here. So good thing to think about with our students this time of year.
Yeah, we're supposed to have an active hurricane system, but season, but I don't know. We haven't had too much activity so far, at least not where we are in Florida, which is good.
Still a little early. That usually doesn't ramp up until September. Yeah,
October. Yeah, sometimes November.
What else? Eric, any announcements?
Sure, a couple things. Eric Havel from California, Oakland and Berkeley area. Do a lot of climate literacy with schools and have a couple deep dive kind of programs where I'm working with the teachers doing professional development over this year with 2 elementary schools. One here in Oakland and one in San Leandro, which is adjacent to Oakland, just south of us. And both of them are interested. It's science support, so just kind of getting their teachers to engage in science, but both of them have requested some climate literacy work specifically. So I have a feeling that that's going to kind of merge into the efforts. And I just ran the initial PDs for them, one yesterday at San Leandro and one the week before. And they went really well, just kind of starting to work with the teachers, get to know the teams. And then the idea is I'll meet with them. In the one case of one school, it'll be monthly during their early release day for their PD which is on a Wednesday. And then the other, it'll be four workshops over the course of the year. So I'm excited about that. And then kind of a related thing is for those of you, Jim and Gina probably know the most about it, but we did something called the Bay Area Climate Literacy Exchange last year, which was trying to bring Bay Area educators, so teachers, students, partner organizations like Jim's project and many others in the Bay Area, um, and um, and administrators to sort of collectively, about 120 people attended at the Chabot Science Center here in Oakland, and it was really successful. So we're intending to do it again in the spring, but we're also trying to lead up to it more intentionally this time. So like really create some plans and engage more people in the planning of it. So I'm excited about that too. And hopefully these schools, that I'm working with, there'll be a connector. So I'll hopefully be able to share that, over the coming months.
Very exciting. That's awesome that you're able to do that. I mean, the long term, right, is always great. So you can help and support. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
meant
And wind turbines, Colleen, will definitely
Yay!
get those in. So
Sweet. Well, so at the Recharge Academy that we had up here in June, there was somebody from a Sacramento utility who is like super excited, maybe wants to try to put together a Kid Win challenge. So I know that's not exactly in your area, but if you want me to connect you to her.
yeah, it's not that far. It's not out of the question. Yeah,
Yeah.
And Chabot does Kidwind stuff. So Kidwind is all over the Bay Area. I
yeah.
mean, Kidwind is probably, one of the most widespread curriculum in the country, easily. So I mean, see it everywhere. And for one, it's funded, and there's a lot of, because it gives materials to schools. So you go to school cabinets and you see tons of Kidwind stuff everywhere. So if I don't mind, if you don't mind me jumping into this will work a lot with Eric, but both Eric and I would be what we're looking at. We're in our 25th year of teaching climate change in museums. 25th years of that, and we'll talk most. Of course, we're mostly talking about classroom, but one is museums are often one of the most powerful ways in which at the district level that education is taught in the schools, right? Oakland is a place where it's the museums that have that role of teaching district wide, and where the most of it is understood. The district has already determined that's where most of our climate education will actually happen, because we don't have the resources to bring it into our schools, but we can bring our schools to the museums. So I've been doing it for 25 years. Eric has been doing it. So that's for instance, we're looking at, of course, Chabot Space and Science Center. We're looking at the California Academy of Science is another one there thing that we can look at. If I can get up the right one, we can get the African American History Museum in DC, the Smithsonian Museum. Let me see if I can get that up there. The Tech Museum, I'm not getting all the logos and things up, but I mean, we've been teaching in these museums for 25 years. And this Saturday we're going to be teaching back up at our standard bearer at Chabot Space and Science Center, right in front of the telescope domes. So that's right now this weekend. That's still in the summer, but we also are training teachers at that for the winter and for the upcoming fall. So that's 25 years of also sharing clean resources. So what we look at, part of what we look at is what resources are we teaching, what resources are we recommending to be in the schools. It's a little bit of, there's one of the factors is, do the resources think what is happening in the schools, in the museums, is worth anything? If they're just concerned about getting their program out and I'm just going to provide myself. I don't really pay attention to what the teachers like and what the students like. That's kind of a negative thing, right? Fortunately, Clean has tons of resources and we do that. So anyway, that's a factor, but that's also a thing for, definitely both you, Colleen, and Anne, and the programs you have, we want to connect with what the students are doing, because that's an important thing. Students need to know it's not just happening in their city, in their school. So that's some of what I got. Thank you.
Really quickly connecting a dot to Jim, what you shared, that KidWin program we got engaged in I want to say in 2005 or 2006 at Chabot, and it's had staying power for 20 years. I mean, we teach a workshop for field trip kids. It's an hour. They use the materials, they iterate their designs, and they love it. And it's also a public facing. So that's, Wednesday through Friday when Chabot does the field trips, but also on weekends and summertime, we just have an open lab, and it lends itself to that kind of exploration, right? You can just go in, and some kids will stay for hours, just trying to get the maximum voltage that they can. And so it's a really neat, fun activity that kind of gets at the engineering design cycle, but it also makes connectors to climate change and clean energy and all of that. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Hopefully you guys can actually get another competition in your area, maybe get some of the teachers that you work with connected to that, because that's another thing that I like about their now world competition, is that, like you said, Jim, knowing that they're not alone, it's not just their school, they can see how many people around the world literally are thinking about this and doing this, caring about this work. Yeah, okay, well, I think that's everybody, right? No more announcements. Yeah, Gina, I don't know if you had something in mind for discussing more about back to school stuff, or just kind of open it up to folks for.
No, I didn't have anything super specific in mind. I was just gonna share that I was just gonna share about Clean's strategy a little bit and hear if other people have any back to school marketing plans or anything like that. Um, we have an ongoing meeting with some of the NOAA climate um and NOAA Office of Education folks for talking about social media strategy, and they are doing a back to school campaign as well. So we were trying to align some of what we were posting with them. They're using the hashtag back to school hashtag. um, so I don't know, I guess part of me too is also just thinking if, the more people that are kind of hopping on that hashtag and that campaign, maybe the more visibility it will get from our community. So like I said, we're doing a few different webinars this fall. And then interspersed between advertising those, we are going to be advertising some of the top clean resources and doing kind of like themed weeks around we're doing an energy week, we're doing a agriculture week, and we're doing a let's see what the other one is. Um let's see. I can't remember off the top of my head. We're doing a few different themed weeks as well, so they are going to be topical. And oh, youth, that was the other one. So yeah, kind of leaning into themes a little bit and trying to use that hashtag. I don't always think that hashtags are like the best thing in the world to use, but for a little mini campaign like this, I think it makes sense. And I do think that there maybe is some more engagement, a little bit more engagement around this time from teachers. So just gearing up and being really busy, thinking about the school year ahead. And then I feel like we're trying to straddle timing wise what different schools are starting at. Like I being from New York State, I'm used to school starting in September, but everyone that I work with in Colorado, school starts a lot earlier, in like mid-August. So we're kind of trying to straddle that time-wise, where we're trying to hit some of the people that are going back a little bit earlier and then going into September when other states might be starting later. And it sounded like Colleen said that a lot of schools in Alaska are starting kind of early too. So kind of, yeah, just trying to straddle that timeline a little bit as well. But I just was curious if anyone else was trying to do this, do like maybe any extra events or social media marketing, all of that around back to school. And I'll stop talking because Scott has his hand up.
I've got a question. I guess I get my hand up and all, just is when Gina, when you suggestion today for a conversation, I wondered, it made me wonder, I just thought the group to ask if anybody's doing anything related to the election and climate change and the politics, and asking like students to, you know, describe the positions of candidates on climate change or clean energy, or something to create a booklet for their parents or who are the voters over 18 to take a look at. It seemed like it would lend itself well to the beginning of the school year with everybody with the top as a topical thing. I didn't know if people had an issue with trying to get into any kind of with anything with climate education these days. It's got enough politics associated with it already, I suppose. But anybody seeing anything like that in any curriculum or teacher proposals?
Sure. At, at our various schools, there are different people who have different ways of teaching and doing different things in the social sciences and so on. There's certainly some of the students. I mean, two of the schools that I teach at are in DC. People are pretty political thinking, right? I mean, there's more than half of the parents are somewhere working in the federal government or something connected to it. So there's definitely students who bring it up. We get a lot of parents who come in and say that our climate club should be more political. Why don't we do protests? Why don't we do things? Our students are welcome to go and do that, but we don't do that. I mean, there is where we are when we, especially when we're doing science teaching, we stick to the. It's not just because we don't feel restricted. We believe that if you're a science teacher, you should focus on the science and see the connection to the political and the social sciences, where we also have that. We get into it. As far as events go, like the event, so the one we have going on at Chabot Space and Science Center this Saturday, in part, is getting our the presenters who are good at taking the labs out to the big public to practice for doing outdoor labs. Many of them know indoor labs are doing outdoor labs. Part of it is preparing for the event that's coming up a couple weeks after that, which is 100,000 people. It used to be 300,000 people. There's tons of politics there, tons of politics. The different exhibitors that are up there, the people who are doing the political side of climate change are kind of getting late into the game, but they'll be there. We do the hands-on science and things on that, but that's a back to school event. I mean, some of the, it's either schools are just getting in or they, just getting started, but we will always have dozens and dozens of parents and teachers coming up. What can we do to get you into our school? And the first thing we do is we make sure that they know about the CLEAN network and they know the resources. Because our question in our case is we always we are in the schools that are taking serious climate science and climate education and social science seriously. If they teach it, if they're committed, if they have classes, we will be there to support them. We will give them resources. We will be there to teach. We will work with them in the way they want. And we will help teach on using clean resources. For those who want us there, but aren't willing to put much more into. I mean, we're easy, we're free. We come in, we do all this stuff for free. Of course they want us to come in, but we are much more able, if we can reach 100,000 people in a day and have them do that, we're not going to go to a school that is not serious about teaching climate change yet, but is just thinking about it. We've got our hands full with, I mean, now we're in Ghana. The other picture that I have there, we're teaching in Ghana now, right? And these are full out classes and seeing what's going on. One of the things I kind of look at our community is how is our community's different attitude toward schools and classes and teachers that are going beyond 20 or 30 or 40 hours a year, right? Because I sometimes get the idea we don't want that to happen. We're not interested. We're not set up for it. We're not interested anytime it happens. It's just kind of yawn. We get the cold shoulder from a lot of people in the climate community. It's like, what do you got? What do you got? Yeah, you guys are off. You're out of control. You're just like doing things that you shouldn't do. Others are absolutely wonderful about it, a lot of different things. But I just wonder, how is our community adjusting to? There are people like Eric and myself and Colleen and Ann who are very serious climate educators. We don't just dabble in it.
I can also offer this perspective. I haven't heard of anything specific that you mentioned, Scott, about an educational resource that has candidates, kind of like comparing and contrasting candidates. I think that would be really interesting. And I will say that ACE, I just put the link in the chat, they tend to skim the political discussions a little bit, and I feel like they're usually the most engaged in that type of thing. And they do have a voter registration campaign, but that's not exactly looking at policies from candidates and having students compare. So that's not really what you're asking about. But I do think if I wanted political resources, I probably would go to them because they do that work a lot. And I'll just say it's a very interesting dance because even I can see they call this work on voter registration civic engagement, which is, I think, the term that I know a lot of organizations in our network use that term civic engagement to talk about politics without it being politics. Just because, you're not necessarily advocating for something if you have a student looking at specific policies, that's not really advocating for anything one way or the other. It's just about being engaged and understanding what different politicians are claiming to do. That I don't see anything controversial about that, but sometimes people do have their hackles raised a little bit about it. So I know that civic engagement is a term that a lot of people in our community use to kind of get around that a little bit. And it is tricky because like CLEAN, we receive all of our funding, or a large percentage of our funding from NOAA, and we don't want to step on any toes, and we want to be respectful of the fact that we do receive funding from the federal government, and cannot advocate one way or the other. So we really do try to stay away from talking about the election and trying to, I don't know, get too deep into those kinds of conversations, but I do think there's a way to do it without it being over the top, and advocating for anything. So yeah, those are kind of a summary of my thoughts, and just I think you'll find a lot of people in this network have a similar situation where they have funding that is either public or private, either federal grants, or they have nonprofit boards that don't want the organization to be advocating for one way or the other. So people are just kind of nervous to delve into that. Although it is relevant and it is timely and arguably something that really, really needs to be talked about. So that's been my perspective on all of that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's you honed in on some keywords. I think the civic engagement part of it, and I agree. I mean, I think it's really an important thing. I mean, to be able to have students think, well, maybe this, you're not advocating for one position or another necessarily, but you have to sort of say, okay, well, climate change is important for our future. We need to look at what are the candidates saying about this? How can we develop some way of analyzing whatever that is their positions are, and then put that out in a booklet or something? Is not advocating for any particular candidate or anything, but just sort of saying this is an important thing. And might prompt some, good discussion and debate among the students themselves about some of these things. And I think a teacher might be able to facilitate some of that in some good ways, and you know, be critical about the arguments that are being used or whatever they're saying. Is it jibe with the facts of science education or whatever, that these positions that people are advocating. So I think there's some ways to bring it in, as you're saying. I just, wasn't, and maybe your resource is a good one to take a look at those kinds of things and think about, if there were some social studies or teachers or history teachers involved, they might have that kind of perspective on how to do those kinds of things.
One of the ways that it's big in the schools right now, for one, is we have to be aware of there are so many people who are telling teachers what to do, but they're not the teachers. They don't face what we face when we're in there, what's going on, the pressures and the reality, and how much in so much parts of the country, even in places like DC or California, if you start to talk too much about politics, you're going to be fired. And you probably should be if you do it the wrong way, because you're putting the whole school and the whole place in a place where, I mean, our school, when it has done certain things at Lowell, it has gotten all over the right-wing media, right? Things that I don't agree with, that I thought, man, you don't get little kids to go around holding picket signs, walking around. It's like, not, I mean, I that's one style. People want to do that, but it just, the right-wing media just picked that up and went all over it, right? Another thing is that a discussion that comes up a lot is there's some of our students, some of our active students in Climate Club will repeat something that's common, and you all can get that. Well, they'll say, so this is like a discussion that goes on among the students. Voting is the most important thing you can do, the most important thing you will do. There's nothing, it outweighs everything else you do. Well, for one, the students can't vote yet. Okay. And for two is, a lot of our students were about, no, my parents will vote. I will vote the first time I can. And we're not saying how you vote, right? But we're saying you're going to vote. But the idea that that's all you can do, that's incredibly ridiculous. That's not a democracy. A democracy is a place where you can go and work on the things that you care about. You can do things, you can try and get a job where you're going to get a career in climate action if you want. You can do protests if you want. You can work for change if you want, and you should. And if you don't, it's going to be controlled by the people who have the money to pay everybody else to do something. The corporations and the billionaires will control it. That's real discussion that our students have, and it's not just abstract discussion. Yes, we're going to vote. Yes, our parents we're going to tell people they should vote. We have our ideas. But they get into a discussion about, like, we are surveying the White House, which is terribly inefficient inside, right? The White House. Now, without having to say we advocate, but the kids get it. If we are doing these surveys and we have the White House all surveyed. If the election goes one way, the person who's going to run the federal administration has no interest in going energy efficiency, and they're going to keep it all incandescent, or 60-80% incandescent as it is inside the White House now. If it goes the other way, we're going to have a real opening to go and talk to the White House. We're younger now, we're more involved. let's get this building energy efficient and allow you to walk your talk, right? Not just say it for the rest of the federal government, and then you're the home of POTUS, we're got a huge carbon footprint. The kids are getting, the young people are getting an idea. We get to make some real power. So we believe in voting, but the idea that the only thing we can do in voting, we're handing our society over to oligarchs. If the only thing we do is we spend 4 hours a year voting, and we don't do anything else for the things that matter. So anyway, I'm not trying to say other people have to do this, but that's something, and that's a discussion that is totally within, we're not breaking any normal rules about how you can talk about things in a school.
So, Jim, is what I'm hearing you saying is that if you're talking about it through the lens of voting, you're worried that people are talking about only voting? I mean, because that's not really what I was hearing Scott say, but is that what you're concerned about?
Okay, so I mean, there's all, okay, so there's a thing of knowing what school you're in, what district you're in, what community you're in, and how
Oh,
you
yeah.
do things.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you
but
gotta
there's
worry about
also,
your audience is important. Your context is so important.
then you have to also know that if you're a leader in climate education, if you're a progressive school, it's doing things and doing this, you are going to be watched by the right-wing media. And so you can be in a place where your community is fine with what you're doing, but they're going to put it out there. We've seen that happen. They put it out there. So it can get amplified what you do quite widely. I mean, I know, there's a lot of people at Low School who think are doing what is a huge, I feel this is huge in education right now. People are soft pedaling what they do. I think the federal government is people in the federal government, I see people soft pedaling. I mean, basically, we're kind of not really talking about climate change too much. We're getting kind of quiet. We're waiting to see how the election turns out. Because one of the things that is a factor in society of where our society might go toward very repressive, if you have taught climate change, you are now got a target on your back. We're going to come and get you, right? All that kind of stuff. All that's just talk that goes on in society. I think a lot of people are worried, and they're especially again in DC, people are worried about if they're in the federal government, should they be pushing things like climate change now, or are they trying to do things so quietly and so fine that they're going to get to keep their job no matter whichever administration there is, right? There's a lot going on. So that, and the teachers feel that. The teachers are feeling this is a time, these number of months have been a time where I've seen people really get timid for a while. Anyway, I don't know how other people think. It's different in the schools than what we who kind of, when we're in the mode of we're watching, we're promoting curriculum. It's different when you're in the schools. Eric, do you feel that too? Or at least that idea how we have to, and Colleen, and I guess Scott too. You're there. What's the mood? What's the feel, and how it shifts in the schools and the teachers?
I think from my perspective, yeah, this is a pivotal election, certainly with climate change at the national level. I think California is pushing forward. We passed SB 285, which mandates climate literacy, climate education in science, all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade. It's already been kind of embedded through NGSS at the upper levels, at the secondary, middle and high school levels. But I think, so there's that going on, right? And then you have just a lot of groundswell of districts passing climate resolutions. I'm involved. There's a group I think a lot of you are familiar with in California called 10 Strands, which drives climate literacy and climate education across the state through various projects. And one thing that I'm engaging with this fall is mentoring a couple of Bay Area students who are are very passionate about climate change and want their districts to do more. So there's been four districts that actually have formal climate resolutions on the books, but there's many other school districts that have environmental education mandates. So 10 Strands has done a really extensive kind of survey of the entire state and has a pretty good sense district by district, county by county, who's doing what. So I think there's a lot of momentum in California for climate literacy, and I think that will continue, but it would be awful if we lose the resources at NOAA or NASA with an administration change, because that's just data. We need to collect that data. We need people running those organizations that are climate literate, that understand science, that believe in science, and not, you know, sort of the fox watching the hen house type of a situation, right? Which we saw in the previous administration. So I'm hopeful regardless of what happens. And oftentimes when you get the sort of quote the group that's not supportive of climate change education, that actually builds momentum for the opposing. You know, there's sort of an, but that being said, you know, I think we would just be sort of seamless and continuing to move in a positive direction. But you know, so yeah, that's where I see California. But I know, you know, Scott in Florida. I don't know the landscape in Alaska. I'd be curious about your thoughts, you know, about those states and how you see things at the state level, and what sort of a shift in administration would mean, you know, at the national level.
I would, the James' question about the observation, sort of spy in the sky sort of thing about schools. I mean, I guess I about it that way so much, but I think, that could be very relevant for Florida schools, and something I'm not actually in the classroom, and maybe Ann can have some insights into that. I'm starting to try to find out, obviously our group is trying to promote climate education. That's one of the reasons we wanted to do it, because there's at the gubernatorial level, there's been negative pushback against doing this stuff. So it'd be interesting to find out. I guess maybe Ann has some thoughts of whether teachers over the last couple months, especially as we ramp up towards the election, really want to tamp down on any climate education going on here. And, it would probably be extend beyond, this particular election. And, because since DeSantis is still governor, for at least for a couple more years while he's still in that office. And we do definitely have had an influx of people in this state moving here that are more, I would say right wing, and that kind of attention is definitely negative. So I don't know how it's impacting our teachers. Ann, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, a few. I mean, he has not gone as far as to outlaw the teaching of climate change. I mean, as far as I know, we're still able to do it. I mean, we still have our Climate Ready program, and we still, we had students sign up for it, and we ran a successful, institute this summer. And, so, it's not, and it was all about climate change. It was a whole week on climate change, so, we were still able to do that, but it's definitely, a politically kind of a dicey area. So, and we, like I said, we're not outlawed yet, but I don't know if that's going to be coming. You know what I mean? I think a lot of our freedoms might be kind of taken away from us. So I don't know. It's kind of a dicey, dicey area. So
how do people think about this one? If we don't, I have felt for 25 years that there's a lot of influence on education. Shouldn't do what education should do. It should do what somebody politically wants us to do. That I've felt that pressure for 25 years and can name tons of ways. Somebody's got a political message and they want that taught in the schools. Don't get into science, don't get into this. We want to get to that message. And then frankly, a lot of that started when Al Gore had Inconvenient Truth, right? We were getting it's political will, and that's the thing we teach. And we got a lot from his people on how we should teach, including one of the things I really want to push back on that is we're going to tell you how to teach science in a way that's political. You know how to teach it accurately. We want you to teach it in a way that's so simplified that you don't have to spend a lot of time on it and get to the politics. Okay. Well, one of the things I think is like if we talk about what are we preparing for, what are we getting ready for right now with our semester coming up, is a heavy emphasis on careers in climate science, climate action, right? All the kind of careers are having guests coming in, having people meet people in those careers, getting to know those careers, do that. And as you people have heard me speak before, we have a special thing where we have to pay attention to if these are kids or young people of color, are these careers that they have a chance to go in? Because if they don't, then what's the point? They can't do anything about climate change except complain or vote or things like that. They can't devote their career to it. And we are making sure that's the case. If in places like DC and California, we have schools where students are learning how to go into careers on climate action and doing it, that will either set the bar for the whole country or fail to be the gold standard. So in places in Florida and so on, where it's more difficult to deal with this, you don't have that example, right? We're providing an example so people can say, I mean, what's one of the things that's going on, say, Minnesota, right? Well, Minnesota, one of the things that goes on with the guy who's representing Minnesota is, hey, look, we've got a very successful economy. People are happy here. People are doing things. We've got these careers. Now you go to some place like Oklahoma or Wyoming, your standard of living is lower. Your GDP is lower. You have all these things, and you're stuck in this old, obsolete energy system. You can do that, and you're not going to have any jobs for your students. They're not going to learn anything. I mean, that's a very strong one is practical, but it's a very strong thing for parents and things to look at. Is like, hey, if you want to stick with coal, you can stick with coal, and look what will happen. You can go over to all these careers and things like that. I mean, you're going to do what you think is right for your kids, and you might want to consider that happening. But I mean, I think I see it the places that we have where we can teach and get into these things on a high level, I feel we have an obligation to do it, right? If I can teach all year round in schools, in California, a lot of it shows up, Eric, is I'm seeing that we have in California, we have all these policies that we need to teach it. But if I go, including to the place where you don't see which unified school district it is, but I talk to the people who are there, is they've got policies. They're making their school buses electric. It's great. They're not teaching climate change in the district, right? You and I both know that district. I go, I've mentioned before, I've talked to him. Who are the teachers who are teaching climate change? And he can't name them. Well, my answer is, how do you not know what we're doing? We're in the next room next to you teaching to all these people. We have been teaching climate change all this time. We want to teach with the teachers who want to teach in this. I mean, I guess there's that thing of one problem we have in California is, in my opinion, there's a thing of how people on the left or progressives or people who are Democrats and so on don't think only people on the other side tend to get fooled by an idea. There's a big thing of get your policies, get your rules, get your resolutions and things in order, and everything's fine. If you don't implement it, if there's no money, if you're not doing it, that's one of the reasons the people who have an R next to their name and things like that don't have a problem with your policies. Go ahead, have your policies. If they're not implemented, it's just making people think you've done something. That's the thing I encountered a lot, that the districts now have these policies, but they're not implementing them. And then I kind of go up to them and say, well, we're implementing them. Do you want to work with us or not? Right? If you don't, we're going to keep doing it. For those who are, we're going to work with you. But that's the thing of, if we don't have examples in the schools of students really getting into climate careers, think the opportunity that we're missing, in my opinion. I think we have an obligation to have students be able, and CLEAN, to point out for all the fantastic work and things we're doing, CLEAN needs us to provide to them. Look at the careers that CLEAN has helped to build.
I mean, to be fair, Jim, the challenge is climate change is interdisciplinary by definition, right? And the schools and teachers feel obligated to teach life science, physical science, and earth science. And before all the science, it's ELA and math, right? It's the basics. And so, and when school districts like Oakland are challenged with huge bureaucracy, limited resources, and not coordination, you run into exactly this roadblock that you're expressing. However, a district like Berkeley saw this. And so when they passed their resolution, they connected the resolution to financial resources, which they were able to hire a teacher on special assignment to focus on K-12 climate literacy for that district. And therefore, it is now moving forward. To your point, the resources were allocated and it was embedded in the resolution. So the project that I'm working on with these students, it's two students from Fremont, that's the other district that has a climate literacy resolution, and um, is making a lot of strides, but they don't have the person like Ellen driving curriculum. And curriculum is a lot harder of an animal to deal with because it ties to everything, right? And in the when I do these PDs with teachers, I try and express and show that it's not an either or proposition. We're not asking you to do something extra. We're asking you to integrate climate literacy within everything that you're doing, right? Within ELA, within math, within science, so that they go, oh, and here's a lesson, right? So it's I'm a really firm believer on doing the things with the teachers so they can kind of, and then helping them make connections to the standards. So that's where Oakland has fallen down, is they don't have, as you suggest, as you identified, they don't have financial resource for a person. And then this 10 strands survey, this canvas of the state, so they've, to your point about infrastructure and greening schools, right? That's one side of the fence, right? Like that's facilities typically, it's solar panels, it's energy efficiency, it's recycling programs that are actually working, water conservation. That's fairly dialed in, and there's a lot of sustainability departments doing that work. And then you've got the curriculum and education people doing climate literacy, and that's the one that's more challenging. And then you've got at some districts have a higher level position that's getting the facilities people and the curriculum people to work together around sustainability education. And to me, that's even better, right? You've actually got somebody in the upper level admin that's saying, you guys need to play well together. You guys need to leverage your green campus in an environmental curriculum. As you said with the White House, Jim, like walking the walk, having a physical plant that you can reference. And that was the work that we did at Chabot for years, Jim, was to say, like Bay Area Green certification, like have adequate recycling bins, point out, and we even got these placards around that talk about the green features of the facility. So 100% agree with you. It's frustrating when the resources aren't allocated. The resolution is one thing, but the implementation, as you said, is another. But there's lots of obstacles that I think that are preventing, forward progress for some districts like Oakland. And I'm trying to work on that. I'm really trying to get constituents in Oakland together that are doing this work and to sort of talk to each other because no one's doing that for the district, right? There's not, it used to be a colleague of mine, but post-COVID, that position got eliminated and science got really diminished for the district. It sort of went two steps back post-COVID, and you had an actual staff person driving climate literacy, though I don't know if it was formally part of her job at the time. So it's kind of it's challenging. I definitely agree.
Well, and if people don't mind, I'm in a conversation with Eric. We're neither argumentative nor is meant to be just Eric and I. But I think these are good case studies. These are real things going on, and the Bay Area is a place where if we can't get it done there, where can we do it? So Eric, here's a particular thing that happened that is just this is our challenges, and we're doing it. I got to know a teacher at the Berkeley High School, at Malcolm X High School, elementary school in Berkeley, right? The Unified School District. And that was part of the Climate Generation Summer Institute. Got to know it, talk. And she was just super excited because she's been trying to do something that we are doing in DC. And how do we do it? And like to do it. Okay. So we're going to follow up. And basically then she said a couple days after this institute, I've got to clear this with the district. So she went to this person at the district and it died. The district there's no support, like run with it and things. Now, I don't see that a dead cause. Let's check and see, can we get that going? What's going on?
The person she should have gone to is Ellen McClure, who is the teacher on special
As
assignment.
far as I know, that's who she went to, and there isn't. Did not get any back. Let's run with it. Now, that's not a dead issue. Let's go. But that's often the way it happens. And I know from talking to the Berkeley and Fremont and Oakland, what are the things that the district people bring up? And one of them is their attitude toward elective courses, or their attitude to one school being the first one to do something. Because often all those districts will raise, unless we can do it everywhere as a non-elective thing, we can't do it. Like Fremont will tell us, when I brought up elective courses, I don't know, it's really hard to get elective courses because it means we're going to have to kill an existing elective course. We can only allow so many elective courses. I mean, so there's all these, one after another, these things that are, yeah, it's a resolution, but we can't do it. And what I'm doing with them is engaging them over, okay, you're presenting a problem. Let's give you a solution. Let's give you a solution. Let's get you a solution. And I say to them in a very friendly way, if you're responsive and you want to move on it, we want to help you. We can bring you resources. We can do this type of thing. But at a certain point with some people, you say, you've brought up 15 different problems and we've got a solution to every single one of them. And then you bring up a 16th one. I don't think you seriously want to do anything. We're going to work with the districts that do. I mean, that's the kind of real thing of not giving up on people, but also kind of like not accepting, well, we've got a resolution, so we don't have to do anything. I don't accept that with them. Let's get some action there. And when you've got a teacher who wants to take action and do things, the thing I'm going to ask you to do, I mean, when I have, I get to know them. So these are friendly conversations, but they're is, you know what I'm going to ask you to do? Get out of the way. Let them teach. Let them be creative. Just get out of the way.
To put a little bit of an Alaska perspective on this too, it's also can be, it's interesting, right? Because in Alaska, it's tends to be very conservative, not a blanket statement by any means, of course. Just like any state is not monolithic, only one identity. But we do have a very Republican governor and a very conservative governor, but we also, of course, are very much on the front lines of climate change, especially rural Alaska, Western Alaska. And so it's very much, I find it's often not a contentious issue, like talking about it. Nobody's trying to argue, that it's happening or even that it's human caused. The issue tends to be when people talk about less drilling, less drilling of oil, and so that's the sort of perspective that I tend to avoid. And I see a lot of teachers that I work with tend to avoid. And really our message is just that, well, we can have fossil fuels and renewables. It's not like it's either or. Now, of course, personally, I think we should, completely drop the fossil fuels. But in terms of the conversations with students, it's like kind of a starting point, because it is so much like that they think about, oh, it's only one or the other. And so like, well, let's talk about both, it doesn't have to be either or. And it's interesting, Eric, you're talking about, the proclamations that are passed about climate education, because after that happened, I had somebody reach out to me and said, well, hey, could we do this in Alaska? And I was like, well, I don't know how effective that would be if the governor proclaiming like do climate, or even if we could get that to happen, how effective that would be. And my thought was like, well, want to focus on the school districts and getting the curriculum, like you said, Eric, the curriculum, right? Like get the curriculum so that they have access to that. And that it's at really the district level in Alaska where stuff is happening. And to your point too, Jim, about like letting teachers be creative and be able to teach it and have it, their own way and not prescribed, like, but being able to have them have resources to do that. Because a lot of times we also have really high turnover of teachers, especially in rural Alaska, but really all over the state. And so having something that's available at the district level and to support them can help teachers who are maybe new to a district feel more comfortable even talking about it. Any topic, really. Anyway, my 2 cents on variety of things I'm hearing.
Just really quickly, Colleen, I agree. I mean, I try to think if I were a teacher in Alaska, I couldn't do what I do in California and DC. I would learn from how Colleen has survived and done well there. So just there's a lot there. And the turnover among teachers is severe. I won't dominate more on examples on that, but it's like it's a huge issue.
Yeah, we were talking in our retreat yesterday because we have folks who do policy, in Alaska and the state level, and they're like, "Whoa, what policy would do to help you?" And I'm like, "How can you pass a policy that we actually have an increase in our base student allocation and can pay teachers what they're worth? That would be helpful for me." Like that's not something that's going to happen from REAP, but that's what I could use so the teachers stay. They actually have a decent retire. Anyway, it's a whole other rant, but. And I'm remembering that I'm being recorded, so I better gotta be careful about what I'm saying.
Colleen, may I ask about Alaska? So sharing and also Anne, so anywhere teaching in other places to learn from them. How you cope with or deal with the idea of if you've got a program, if you've got a school, if you've got a teacher that is doing what you want, is what we want, is doing good things. Is that supported? Is that ignored? Is that suppressed? How when we see what we want to see happen, what happens?
It's so different from district to district, and it can even change from year to year depending on who the new superintendent is of the district. But generally it's either ignored or supported because people just to get excited about teachers who are doing things. Like I'm thinking in a town in interior Alaska called Galena, and they have this residential school called Galena Interior Learning Academy, and they are powered completely by or they're heated completely by biomass, so like local renewable biomass, and they have this whole sustainable energy Galena project, and the teachers in the school are teaching about clean energy and wanting to support that. So they have this, I mean, it's pretty tiny by your standards, only get to it by a plane, boat, snow machine, right? But they're thinking about all this and teaching about all this, and the district is excited that people are that they have teachers who are into this and who are teaching this, and they want to support them because they're just so appreciative, I think, of teachers who are doing that work. Other times districts will see that and just be like, oh, okay, well, it's one less thing I have to worry about. I'm going to focus on these teachers who need all my help because they're stretched then too, the admin level. So I haven't heard of, I mean, probably, I don't know if I would, but I haven't heard of ones who are necessarily being suppressed or shut down, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. It's a big state.
Well, I like good news like what you just gave us.
Yeah. Not all bad, fortunately. Well, I think we are at the hour here. Does anybody have any final parting thoughts before we wrap up? Well, thanks for the great chat today. Good to see you all.
Thank
Likewise.
you.
Thanks for facilitating.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Colleen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks,
and everyone.
Colleen.
Thanks, Gina. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Yep,
Bye.
you guys too. Bye.